Get ready for an unfiltered and uncensored listening experience.
Gender reveal.
Ginawa.
Naisisipin ko, ako yung tipo ng tao na pag dumating ako sa puntong sagot na sagot na talaga.
Benta niya 90 million. Where can you find that?
Don. God
Where can you
damn.
find that?
Hello, I'm back. Alright, I'm back. So we have Michelle in the podcast. Thank you so much for coming. So, um, in this podcast, in this episode, we're gonna talk about learning disabilities, which is, very dear to my heart because I'm not sure, but I'm gonna check it out. But I kinda have that um difficulty in learning, especially in schools.
Mhm.
So in high school, I typically uh graduated in high school without even studying, without even doing some homeworks. Not because I'm lazy. Sometimes I'm lazy, but it's really difficult for me to you know digest things, digest um the teaching of my teachers. Um, so for the audience to get to the conversation, I'm gonna let Michelle introduce herself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on here, Nick. I really appreciate that. Well, my name is Michelle Steiner. I live in Pennsylvania with my husband and our two cats, Jack and Sparrow. And I have a learning disability. I have dyscalculia, the math disabilities, and I also have visual perception and eye-hand coordination issues. And I also have limited hand dexterity in both of my hands.
Oh wow! So how was it in your early years, especially in elementary, then high school? How was that for you?
Right. Well, excuse me. In the very beginning, it was difficult. I had a great teacher in kindergarten that noticed that just some things were really off with my development, and I just wasn't picking up on information. I was struggling with counting, tying my shoes, and she just noticed that there was something different. So she recommended that I get tested for a learning disability. Now, my parents knew when preschool, I had a teacher that thought something was off too. But at that point, we didn't have the services and the testing that they do now for young children. So I went off to kindergarten, but the teachers saw what was going on, and I was tested for having a learning disability, and sure enough, I have one. And at that time, they didn't give a specific name for a learning disability, like dyscalculia. I mean, I think they were doing dyslexia, which I don't necessarily struggle with reading. It's more with the math and that. So what my parents did after that was they went and had a meeting with the psychologist and my teacher at the school, and they said she's going to have to repeat kindergarten in a new school district, and I was whenever I went to school in my new school, I began to receive specialty services. So we would do specialty instruction on how to read. We attempted to do math, and I spent the afternoons in kindergarten. And I eventually the services began to work. I was able to go into regular ed for spelling and reading and science and social studies with support such as having extended test time and having the test read aloud. I still really struggled in those early years. I think those years were the hardest academically. The bullying also started, but that got worse as I went through school. But those early years, I didn't think that I was smart. I didn't think that I could learn. I thought that life was always going to be really hard. And academically, it got a lot easier. I was in all regular ed classes except for math and resource room by the time I was in high school. Socially, it got a lot harder. A lot of the groups were more defined. So I just really didn't feel like I fit in with any one of them. And I began to hang out with some students that were in a neighboring school district, and they were in an art program, and that gave me some acceptance. And that was truly something that helped me along, and that gave me the courage to go out and find some people in the community. I'm still involved in relationships about 30 some years later. So it really has been wonderful with that. The academics was getting easier with the supports. I made honor roll. But the thing that was a little troubling was I wanted to, what I was going to do when school was done. I knew that I wanted to go to college, but I had some people that didn't think I could do that. I had a learning support teacher that said, well, I don't think you can do that with your math disability. So why don't we send you to a vocational school? And I had no desire to do that. There was nothing there that interested me. So we went and pursued that, the planning for that. And I was able to graduate high school and go on to college.
Oh, wow, that was awesome. And you know that kind of um discourage from other people really
Mhm.
affects people, especially with um learning disabilities. Sometimes um I I also experienced it in high school where
Mhm.
when you're almost at the bottom in the academic status, sometimes that's where the bullying comes in. That's where um
Yes.
people discouraging you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, how do you handle those things?
Well, I think what has made me has helped me is to focus on what I can do. And it's always more empowering to focus on the things I am good at, like reading and photography and helping kids out in the school. If I focus on the things that are really impossible for me, such as math and driving, uh, it makes me more discouraged. So I try to focus on those good things, and that really helps. And I can. There was a time where that really was discouraging to me. I can remember even having a psychiatrist telling me, "You won't go beyond community college," and I was really concerned about that. And I had another professor that said, your job choices are going to be limited. And that to me was always really on what I couldn't do. But when I focused on what I could do, it was a lot more encouraging to me.
Oh, that's awesome. Because it's really difficult to find the support system. Sometimes it really
Mhm.
goes on on your parents' side. You know what I mean? Because there are some parents that if they saw you aren't really uh accelerating on your education and academic side, they'll be the one who's gonna discourage you to go to college. You know what I mean?
Right. I was really blessed to have a family that's always
That's awesome.
encouraged me too. And they explained my disability from the time I was very young on simple age appropriate terms that I learned differently. And they advocated for me in the schools when they knew that I wanted to go to college or they about a program I wanted to study for. They advocate. My mom would go to the meetings and she would say, "Hey, your IEP meeting's coming up. Is there anything you want us to talk about?" And I would usually say something, and she would go there. But when as an adult, I had to be the one that would speak up for myself. And they did encourage college because they understood that I could do it. And sometimes they were the ones that really understood, especially when I was in university. When I was enrolled in a math class or philosophy based one, and I felt like, oh, I'm not. It was really hard, and I felt like I was this kid back in elementary school trying to get this together, and I wasn't doing it right. And I said, "Mom, I feel like I'm this kid back then," and they were the ones encouraging me. "You're brave. You're strong. You can do this." And a lot of people don't understand what that is like when you're in a class that you're struggling with and you're failing. People think, well, if you just think positively, it's going to work out, or if you put in all the effort. And sometimes it's just there's just things that are going to be really difficult for me. Some things I can't do, but it's just about finding a way. And that's just something my parents were always so encouraging with me with school.
That's awesome. And to get a point of view to other
Mhm.
people, I'm having a learning disability is really difficult even when you're studying, because one of the uh what I hear from my teacher or from other teachers who have also have the same experience is
Mhm.
you just have to study. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like you really have to
Mhm.
focus. But the problem is it's really really hard. I know it's kind of lazy reasoning, but it's really difficult.
It is. And I know for me, if somebody tells me, "Oh, you got to study all these hours," I thought that was so overwhelming. And if if I cram information, I'm not going to do as well. So I would have to learn to take a little bit of time every day and go over things. And that's something I try to tell the students I work with in the school. Don't try to cram everything in the night before. Go over things a little bit every day. Just make that little bit of progress. And most of them do really well if they just take that time, because it is overwhelming. And sometimes it's hard to also focus too. That's like the reason for one of my accommodations in college was back to having that extended test time. Only it was in a quiet environment, and I didn't have to focus on the class or any, even if it was quiet, the distractions, and that gave me enough time for my brain to process the information. One of the neatest things about taking my test in that room was I also had a tutor for that math class I was struggling with, and he had ADHD. And there was one day we were both taking a test, and I look over, and there he is in the room, and there I am. And we talked about it at the session, and he said, "Yeah, my brain just needs extra time like yours does to just be able to process what somebody's asking me to do."
Let's talk about in our point of view. For me, when I study, um it's really difficult for me to digest the lessons. Like
Mhm.
to put in it to perspective, it's like when I try to study, the words become to jumble. You know what I mean? You're
Right.
gonna your brain's gonna imagine that words are scrambling, and
Hmm.
that's my difficulty on studying. But I love to read. Nobody knows that. Like reading for me is easy and sometimes time consuming, because unlike other people, they can read books like in an hour or two. For me, it usually takes me around a day or two, sometimes month, because when I read books,
Hmm.
my brain scrambles the letters, so it's difficult for me to digest. Sometimes my brain imagine things. I know it's very lazy to hear that from some people, but that's my difficulty. For you, what was your uh like your perspective on studying and what your brain does?
Right. Well, for me, the thing that was hard was reading comprehension. I could read the words, words don't jumble around like that. But for me, it was comprehending and finding what the main idea was. That was something I struggled with reading, because I could read things out loud really well, but I comprehending it could be hard, and trying to find the important information. It can also be hard for me. In order for me to remember something, I have to have an emotional attachment, or something has to really stand out. Like I have friends that tell me, "You have such a great memory. You can remember things that we told you years ago, or such, or funny stories, or even situations that they told me about things when they were growing up." And I can remember people and things. But if you give me something like uh, as math facts to remember, or the multiplication table, it's really hard for me. Dates are hard, and just trying to recall details. And a lot of people thought, well, that's just test anxiety, because I could study with my parents and I would know the information. Sometimes I didn't. I mean, just I wasn't able to grasp it. And I would go and I would take a test and I wouldn't do well. And sometimes just how they were asking the questions, sometimes not understanding it. If I didn't have any accommodations such as extended test time, I would hurry up and I would finish, and it didn't give me enough time. And that was really hard with studying, for just trying to remember a lot of that information. So sometimes if I had to remember things, I'll have to use mnemonic devices, or I'll have to think about people or places. And when I can do that, it's a lot easier than just trying to memorize a list of things.
That's the thing, right? Like, I can really relate on that because
Mhm.
I'm not saying that I have a photographic memory, but my memory is almost that good. But when in terms of, you know, trying to remember the what I read, or trying to remember
Yeah.
on what my teacher is saying, like, I'm kind of a goldfish on that. I know it's very weird to hear that from me and when people hear this, but that's really the difficult part. You have a get you have a great memory, but in terms of the academic stuff, it really, sometimes you becoming a goldfish.
Yeah, exactly. Because I would study and people would think, well, you just have to try harder. You have to study harder or longer, or you can do better. And yeah, sometimes just on stuff, and some of it's selective attention. If you're going to put me in a math or a science class, that can be really hard if I don't have the interest. Or a history class sometimes was difficult growing up. But if and another thing with the memory too, people would comment if I had a class where they did a midterm, a final, maybe one paper, and pop quiz and quizzes. They said, "Oh, that's so easy. I get an A," and I would go and take the class, and I get a C, or even less than that. And people said, "Well, how could you possibly get a C?" And it's because a lot of it's the test taking. I would just not, I'm not a great test taker. And that's also something why the psychiatrist didn't think I could go beyond community college. I mean, my scores were not really high. And it's just that sometimes I do better in a class where I can apply information, where I can understand it. And it's just that it's finding that way to be able to do it, and knowing when you go into a situation what your best options are.
That's really refreshing to hear because I I haven't really heard people like me who have this. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
love doing school. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I love in school. But in terms of, you know, test taking, it's really difficult for me. I don't know why, but
Right.
that is
Yeah.
something, yeah.
Yeah, and I honestly think they test you on what they want you to know, but I have to think, do they really test me on what I know? And that's always the hard part.
Yeah. Um let's talk about your experience in college because
Mhm.
um college here in the Philippines is, I think, different from in the States. Um in your college application, what's the process on that? And how did you do it? The reason I ask is it's
Mhm.
different from other people who have learning disabilities because in college applications you have to take entrance exam, right? I don't know if we have the same process.
Right. Well, right. Typically what they do is, if you might take SATs and to get into,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to go to university. That is not something that we did, and that was a question I had when I met with. We have a program called Office for Vocational Rehabilitation, and they go in and they pay for testing. All your testing is covered for a disability. If you have a disability, they'll pay for school, they'll pay for job placement, but I was asking them, I said, I never took the SATs. So they said, why don't we try going to a community college first, seeing how you do? And a lot of times they look at how well you did at community. I did have to take an interest exam, but everybody that has to take that, and your score doesn't determine whether you pass or you fail being admitted to the college. It's to see where you're at and if you need to take placement courses. That's how our community colleges work compared to university.
Mm-hmm.
So sure enough, I did not do well on the entrance tests, and I had to take preparation courses. And it was interesting because because of the reading comprehension and just being a great test taker, the professor was wonderful. And I'm in prep reading and prep writing, and she's like, you really don't belong in this class. You know how to do all this stuff. So it was easy for me. The prep math was very difficult. I was able to get a waiver because I couldn't even go past the prep math. But that was after I had to submit the documentation for having a disability, and I had to take another class in lieu of that. So yeah, that is hard. I hear you. And then when I went to university, they did look at how well I did at a community college, and everything was fine. And I was able to get admitted without taking SATs. So that was helpful as well.
That's great. And during your college days, how was it?
The first time around when I was at community college, it was really difficult. My grades, there was that stigma about using disability accommodations. I was registered for them, and I didn't use them fully, and my grades just really plummeted. And the same people that didn't think I should be using them told me, well, all you need to do is try harder, and you can do better. And I was doing the best I could do without the accommodations. And I was also working 20 hours a week, and I was a full-time college student. So it was really, that was difficult. And I finally had a professor in a class I was really struggling in. I was telling her, I'm really struggling in the class. And she said, well, why don't we at least get you extended test time? And I was able to pass her class. I didn't do well. I graduated from community college, and I always wanted better for myself. I was able to move on and get a job and move out on my own, but for financial reasons, I had to move back in with my parents. And I thought, this is the time to try to go back to university. My job was downsizing, and I found the right program that had the least amount of math and science possible. It interested me, and there was disability accommodations, and I made sure that I used them, and I advocated for myself. And I was able to silence that little voice that told me that these are cheating, and I could silence the voices of those who were telling me that I shouldn't be using them. And once I did that, it was so much better. I made Dean's List one semester. I was just, my grades were well. I had a lot of understanding professors. There were a few that didn't get it, but there's always one or two. But I knew how to handle it, and I was able to graduate with a bachelor's degree, despite what other people told me I couldn't do.
That's awesome. It's really awesome because it's very rare to hear that from people alike, because in having a learning disability is really difficult in terms of finding the support system. And when you
Yeah.
find people alike, it's it's not kind of overwhelming, but it's kind of refreshing because you have the same experience, you have the same
Yes.
difficulties, but when you see that person succeed despite of that, it's motivating and really refreshing.
And that is the key thing. It is very motivating. I love connecting with other people that have learning disabilities or other types of disabilities. Writing has always been really therapeutic for me. And I had a friend that said, you should really write about having a learning disability. And I said, I don't know if I really want to write about this. This is kind of personal. But when I wrote that first article that got published on the Mighty that talked about my struggle with opening up locks with limited hand dexterity, I found that people, it was very healing for me, and people weren't running away or rejecting me. In fact, I found other people that that's something they struggled with too. And that just built to write more articles on that. And I have a blog where I post photographs, and I also have disability articles on there. And it's that connecting with other people that have disabilities, because other ones who have mine, and even people who don't, they get it.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes, um,
Hmm.
when you haven't find someone like you, it's very discouraging. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
because your support systems is telling you you're not equipped with college. You're not equipped on, you know, succeeding academically. Um, that sometimes reflects, because what people are saying to you, it really reflects on your performance, because you haven't found that person like really motivates you. What I do is, um
Mhm.
that's really where my extreme competitiveness comes through, because
Mhm.
I really don't have that support system around me.
Mhm.
Because um in high school and college, I really have a bad grade. um don't get me wrong, I really love going to school every day, but that love sometimes um kills it. You know what I mean? Having that
Oh,
difficulty on really digesting information, it really kills that love.
it does, and I think that's one of the things. Students with learning disabilities don't hate school. What they hate is going in every day and feeling like they're a failure, and failing a
Mm-hmm.
test and getting picked on. That those are the things that you don't like. And I can remember I had someone that I told them when I was really young, "Oh, I want to go to college," and they said, "Well, that's for people who like school." And I did like school. I did. I love learning. I love doing stuff like that. I just didn't like uh, feeling every day that I was frustrated, feeling every day that I was just really struggling. I didn't like the struggles that came along with certain things.
Mm-hmm. um what program that did you take?
When I was at community college, I took early childhood education. That's where we work with little kids,
Mm-hmm.
and also older ones too. As what I can do as a para educator in the school. And I also, when I was at university, I took community programming for Americans with disabilities. Now they call it a transition specialist,
Oh wow.
and that's the yeah, and that's the service end of special education. So we learn about different disabilities and the impact it has, and how to help others. And I also take this program helped me to learn about my own disability, and just the compassion and the love that I had of the school was wonderful in my department. But also, I learned about other people's disabilities and how to help them. And this is some things that I take with me at my job, because I understand what the disabilities are. I know the language around that, and that helps me to be able to help my students, and also for me to be confident, because for a long time I was really negative. And for me, it was going back to school and getting the bachelor's degree that gives me that positivity, it gives me that happiness, and I'm complete with that. And I think if I wouldn't have had that, I don't know if I could really give that hope out to the students that I encounter and the people that I encounter online with my blog and other speaking events.
That's awesome. um when you took that program, is that something that interests you, like interests you so much?
Yes, definitely. It did, because I knew that going into becoming a certified teacher was not going to be the best option for me. But I knew I wanted to go and get a job where I helped other people. And this just seemed like it was the perfect program for me to be able to go and do. And I did well in it, and I love it. And I'm able to take that with me and to be able to do a lot of things with it.
That's awesome. The reason why I ask is, um, it's difficult for people who have learning disability to find that interest. Sometimes it really
Yes.
takes years to find one. Even though, let's say, when
Hmm.
people are in their early 30s, that's where they
Hmm.
find their interest. And maybe their mindset is, oh, I'm too late for this, without realizing there's nothing really too late. The only thing that
Right.
might really uh reflects you is regret. You're gonna start regrets in your 50s, in your 60s, 80s. You're gonna have regrets when, you know, didn't do the things that really interest you.
Right. I mean, I think that's the thing too. I wasn't, when I went back to school, I wasn't a traditional age student. I was in my 20s, my late 20s,
Mm-hmm.
but I still went back. There was a lot of students younger, and that really didn't bother me. Uh, and there were people that were also elderly. They weren't in a lot of my classes, but they had at the college an institute for people that were older to be able to go back to school and learn, and to take classes and audit things and audit some classes. So it's really not too late to go back and do what you want to do, and you can do it on your own timetable, or just to find out what you like to do. And as long as that's your passion and you find a way around it, because there might be things with having a learning disability that I can't do. There might be things that are really difficult, but a lot of times, if you can just know what you want to do and be able to find a way to do it.
Let's talk about the age. I wanna break down
Mhm.
the age because um having learning disability here in the Philippines is still have a stigma, and
Right.
some people didn't even know it. So elementary, high school, college, let's do that. Um, in elementary, when they notice or a teacher notice that there's some child that are so full of energy, but in terms of academically, basically none. So the, basically the teacher is the reason sometimes where children get their confidence very low, because when they see you have this high energy, super friendly, but in terms of
Mhm.
academically you're struggling, they're the reason sometimes um they're the reason sometimes that your energy sometimes becomes nothing, you know, like that love for school
Mhm.
comes nothing. Now, what advices we can give to the to their parents that when when a child's teacher approach the parents that, oh, your children is struggling to do this, you have to do this at home, you have to basically double our effort, without realizing that it's not about, you know, doubling our
Mhm.
efforts, but really let's find a way to get this children the attention he needs.
Right. It's really important that if a parent does have a professional that tells them that there might be something off, that the parents get them in and get them evaluated to see what is happening, and to come up with a plan. That's really important, especially when they're young. I have subbed in some preschools where we did early intervention services for young children, just so that some have been identified with having it. Not some of them don't have a diagnosis just yet, some do. And it's getting those services and getting the family just established with, okay, these are might be some considerations that you might need to take. And we even have birth to three services. So if we have a child that might have symptoms even before they enter preschool, we're able to go in and work with the families. And that just makes all the difference too.
That's awesome. And I really hope that if there are
Mhm.
parents listening and who are, seeing their kids struggle, please don't get mad at your kids, because
Yeah.
usually it isn't really their fault. It it's really difficult for someone who have learning disability to learn from school.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah,
hope they don't get
definitely.
mad.
Yeah. Right. And to be patient with them and
Yeah,
to be able
patience
to,
is really the
yeah.
key.
Mhm.
I'm glad that you said it.
Yeah, exactly. But and to work with the professionals too. That's important too. Like I ran into one of my first learning support teachers, and she said how her and my mom would work together.
That's
And I think
awesome.
that's important too. And it's patience. And I think it's giving yourself grace too. I think it's tough when you first have a child that's diagnosed and you're trying to understand and you're trying to work, but it's having that grace, and it's also having that patience with yourself and with your child.
Yeah, that's great. Um, in middle school, senior high, that's
Yes.
where sometimes our attitude kicks in, where our like
Mhm.
confidence must develop. Now, for people who have learning disability on that stage, that's where the label of troublemaker kicks in. When teacher see a student who is, struggling, but really in the
Right.
community, they got this label of troublemaker. Sometimes um teacher didn't or don't want to take account of maybe there's something wrong with this kid, or maybe there's something wrong in his support system. um how can we help those kids? Because let's I'm not saying all children have this parent,
Mhm.
but there are children who are living in a broken home. They don't have mothers,
Yes.
they don't have fathers. Sometimes their
Right.
grandparents are their guardian, or even their aunt
Right.
is their legal guardian. So how can we like build that confidence up to that kid? Because people don't realize in middle school, in high school, that's where really our developmental stage kicks in. It's not on elementary, or
Right.
it's not in college, but in middle school.
Right. I try to develop with empathy with our students. If I see that we have a student that might be struggling, I might go up and say, "Oh, it looks like you're having a rough day." And sometimes they'll tell you what is happening, and to go and to be empathetic and to say, "Well, what can I do to help?" And just try sometimes to hold them accountable for doing their work and being kind to each other. But sometimes just going up and just having that empathy and just letting them know that you're there for them is really important. And I also encourage this is also the age I work with seventh graders. So we're getting into the age where I'm showing them how to advocate for themselves. I'll have a student that'll come in, they're really struggling. It could be socially, it could be academically, and they're like, I don't know what to do. And I'll say, okay, well, let's try to ask for help. Let's try reaching out to your teacher, and here's how we do it. And the students will be able to do that. And you don't have a scared student anymore. You have one that's prepared and knows what they're doing. And I think that's important. And sometimes that emotional thing, I can just replay a lot of this is like listening to recording of myself at that age. I wish I didn't have a learning disability. I
Mm-hmm.
wish I didn't have an individual education plan. And we just go through and we say, well, having a disability isn't a bad thing. Having this isn't necessarily something that you have it for a purpose, but it's not a terrible tragedy. And I also just thought of something too. When you talked about the student that might have bad behavior, sometimes that can be that they're really struggling academically.
Mm-hmm.
I've come across kids that at this age, maybe because of their disability, they can't read. And rather than say, hey, I'm really struggling with reading this, can you help me? They'll end up acting out in the classroom. And
Exactly.
once you can identify that they can't, and you can go over and try to do the best you can to support them, sometimes that changes the behavior around too.
Mm-hmm. And that's the key of all of this.
Hmm.
Like, if you want to have a student that who has this label of troublemaker, you
Hmm.
really have to identify what's wrong, or what
Right.
where is he struggling with.
Yeah. Hmm. Exactly. It's just learning, and that's where I think sometimes the empathy comes in, and just being able to identify that, and especially with a lot of our students with the demographics, uh, if they come in hungry or they come in upset over something that happened the night before, they can't learn, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where we have to try to address what the issues are, and just seeing how we can best support them.
And especially in this age, this um where finding their interest kicks in, because some students find their interest in an early
Mhm.
age, some don't. So for those people
Right.
who are still um struggling to find that interest, how can we help them find that? Because um it's really difficult to encourage people, or to encourage um people with learning
Right.
disability to, you know, just try things, try new things.
Exactly. And I think the parents can look for ways that things their child likes to do, and try to work from that interest. I can remember my mom and dad, they knew I loved, my dad would read to me every night. And that cultivated this love for reading. And I just loved dad, and would read with enthusiasm. And I can remember I also learned to love writing. My handwriting isn't that great, but I can
Same.
remember my ideas. Yeah. Are good. And I can remember I wrote a story about a dinosaur when I think I had to be second or third grade. And my dad read it and he said, oh, this is really good. And that gave me that confidence, like, oh, I found something that I'm good at, because I really didn't think I had a lot of things that I could do. And I think it's just looking for those things that they're good at, but things they enjoy doing, and looking for a way that they can make that into a training or a college program, and building on that and finding a way to do that.
And sometimes, um and i'm I'm getting this by experience, or my experience, when people find out that um when I was
Mhm.
in high school, where I love programming, I love coding, um when they saw that,
Mhm.
the first thing that they're gonna say, I still remember this vividly. They're gonna say, you're you have an interest in programming, but you're struggling with your grades. How? That's the stigma, because coding,
Yeah.
programming, for some people, it's hard because it's more on problem solving, finding the perfect code for certain problems, or
Right.
remembering the codes in your head. But
Right.
people don't realize that people with learning disability, when we find our interest, our our passion,
Mhm.
that memory really sticks. That's where great memory kicks in.
Yeah, it's finding that passion that you're good at, and that's when you have the interest. And I think that's another thing too. We can maybe as something that might be unrelated to a student, that may not be academic. We can maybe put in characters that they might like, and we can go with the student interest. If they like reading about certain things, we can find books on that to encourage it, and then they don't realize, oh, I'm actually learning. Or even with coding, a lot of the kids are great at that.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in an elementary school with a student who was visually impaired, and, and the student that was visually impaired got on coding a lot better than I did. and she could, she had her board, she had all the modifications, and I was the one giving the wrong commands to that, and oh my gosh, but I would watch these kids, and they're great with how to code. So that's another way too. If someone loves computers, then okay, and you like coding, well, let's take that interest. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, and that builds that self-esteem, because that way you find something that you love, and you're able to give it that interest, and you can do it. And that gives that just builds that confidence.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes,
Mhm.
um, I'm not saying all, but great writers have this, like, this difficulty in learning because
Yeah.
writers, they wrote not from their mind but really what they're feeling. And sometimes great stories, great um article comes with from the feeling from the author, because when I read something, I really trying to read in the point of view of the author, because I
Right.
know when an author wrote a certain times of issues, it really comes down to his experience or her experience, not just by what he learned from school or from what she um read from a statistics website, but really it really comes from the feeling of the author.
Right, and that's right, exactly. It comes from your perspective, your experiences. It's also healing, and it gives me that
Mm-hmm.
voice. I may not be able to go up to somebody that hurt me, and be able to tell them maybe what is on my mind, but when I could write a fictional story and put that character in there, I mean, definitely make it general so it doesn't have like the name of the person. I can do that, or I can write about how I feel, or about what did happen, and I don't list names, and I try not to list like places or real specific information, but I can say that this happened to me and somebody did say this, and this is how it made me feel. And then I'm also able to break down some of the information about learning disabilities, because a lot of times people may not understand what some of those words mean, and I can try to break it down for them, and I can give my opinion, and I also try to give a nature metaphor on top of that too, and it somehow we get it to all work together.
And when people um think of this, especially teachers,
Mm-hmm.
when um it's time for uh recitation, when when they hear student struggling from
Mm-hmm.
recitation, but in terms of writing essays, oh, they're really good at
Mm-hmm.
it. Because sometimes it's hard to speak other than writing, and I experienced this. Like, I stutter a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Like, I'm having difficulty sometimes pronouncing words, but when I write, like, it's like coding for me. Like, you're writing from your feelings without even realizing it.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're able to express yourself. Some people are really good at expressing themselves with writing. Some people are really great with
Mm-hmm.
saying things out loud. Some people are good at both. Other people have a mind that they do well with other forms of learning.
Yep.
And I think it's just really important that we keep in mind that the world needs all kinds of thinkers and different kinds of careers. And it would really be boring if everybody was good at the same thing. Then there wouldn't be any way to help anybody else, because if we're all good at one thing, then nobody else can do another kind of job.
Now, let's go to the college stage. Like,
Hmm.
when people stop going to school in high school,
Hmm.
some people might want to go to college at the age of 25 or 30, but they have this mindset that I'm too old. I'm gonna tell you this: there's no age limit for college. Like
No.
you can go,
Hmm.
you can go 40 and go to college without even
Right. Yeah.
having the stigma.
We're-
Because I think the problem is
mhm.
when you have classmates that is so younger, your confidence might
Mhm.
really kicks in. What I mean in what I mean is the confidence really uh pulls you down, because when you see younger than you, you might think, oh, she's way more smarter than me. He's way more smarter than me. You know what I mean?
Right. But I also think too, though, I mean, a lot of them, they struggle. Some of them have learning disabilities. Some of them,
Mm-hmm.
they're just right out of high school. So they might struggle with those two. And some of them, okay, maybe I have had classmates that have been academically better than I have been. But one thing I did find when I was an older student that I could bring to the table was life experience. I could bring to that just things I experienced in my life, and that just enhanced it when I got there. And it just, I think that's something too that people can do. And it's also not. I had to learn not to really rely on the opinions of others entirely. I
That's
had to
awesome.
learn, yeah, that okay, I'm going to receive the support services, and there's going to be people that are going to understand. There's going to be people who aren't, and that's all right. I have to know what I need to do, and they have to figure out the same way that they got to figure out in their own way what's going to work for them and not for me.
And I understand that people around late 20s, early 30s,
Mhm.
I understand sometimes like life kicks in where
Yeah.
responsibility becomes the priority other than academically. But once you surpass that, don't overthink that you might be too old for college, because there's no, what I mentioned earlier, there's no age limit for college. There's no age limit
Right.
from learning.
Mhm. Right. I'm always learning. And that's even if I'm not in school, I'm always learning something new. Even if it's not academic, just sometimes working with students, sometimes just being around other people that have disabilities and hearing their perspective. So I'm always learning. And I think that's something that people with and without disabilities, everybody does that. Everybody learns. And I think also there's other options too. If somebody can't because of family obligations or because they
Mm-hmm.
work, there's online courses that people can take. There's
Mm-hmm.
part-time options. There is a lot of options out there if somebody wants to do it, and it may take somebody a lot longer. My husband was part-time when he was in school, and it did take him longer to do, but he was able to get his bachelor's too. And I think everybody's at a different place in their life, and
Mm-hmm.
there's ways that we can do it.
Exactly. And how can we like um motivate people who still struggling to find their interest? Because when you're in college, especially
Mhm.
you're 18, 19, 20, and
Yeah.
you haven't find that interest, sometimes the anxiety kicks in, because you're gonna start like, oh, I'm old enough, I'm too old
Mhm.
to find my interest. Oh my god, I still don't have my interest. What should I do after college?
Right. Right. I think sometimes when they're in college and you're young and you don't know what you want to do, sometimes doing a general studies major is a good option. That way you get a little bit of everything,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're able to kind of hone in on what you want to do. Talking to an advisor is also really good because they're great for finding things that you might want to be able to do. I know I had an advisor that I had to do an arts block when I was at university, and she said, well, what about you have to do your arts block? And I knew, okay, I can't draw very well. And I was wondering, what am I going to do? And she goes, well, what about acting? and I took an intro to acting class, and turned out I really loved it. I did a couple plays after school, and I got a really good grade. And it's really interesting to note, because in that acting class, I didn't have accommodations because there really wasn't, couldn't really do extended test time. And I couldn't have really a note taker. I mean, I'm sure looking back, there probably could have been, but it wasn't a lecture based. It was just go and act. And I got an A in the class, and I thought that was pretty neat. With,
Yeah.
but that opened my eyes to some other interested things that I didn't think that I would like or would want to try, but I tried it and turned out to work out really nice.
That's the key, right? Like finding great advisors, because um
Hmm.
I know um when you try to reach out, sometimes you're gonna
Yeah.
get bad advisors giving bad advice, giving bad motivation. But uh, what I want to say is, keep finding. There's great people who wants to help you without,
Yes.
an exchange or
Hmm.
something. Just find ones, or if you haven't find one, still try to connect people, try to reach out, because reaching out isn't, you know um uh isn't expensive. Trying to reach out isn't hard to do.
Hmm.
Just try to reach out.
Right. Yeah, to reach out to people. And you might get an advisor. And I think I knew a little more when I went back to university, because I remember with my advisor I started out with, he was like, okay, well, we need to schedule your classes. And I told him, okay, I have a math learning disability. I'm not good at math. And he goes, how about chemistry? And I looked at him and I said, absolutely not. I think he looked shocked. But it turned out to actually not be a bad thing, because I advocated for myself. And I had, whenever I did my internship when I graduated, and it was a really good experience. And I had different advisors along the way too. But yes, just keep on reaching out. If uh, you get a bad advisor, well, maybe you can get you might get a better one the next time. Or even asking other people, what am I good at? What can you see that I am good at? Or what puts a smile on my face whenever that's a good thing to think about. What puts a smile on my face when I do it?
Exactly.
Things I like to do. Yeah, and to find a way to be able to do that and take it into a career. Or even if you have to get a job that may not be your number one choice, you can still be able to do that in your personal time. And that can bring you a lot of joy and fulfillment as well.
After uh college, like, can you tell us the work that you do after college? Like, what are the experience that you get after college? Because it's hard
Mhm.
for some people to, you know to overcome the feeling of after school, because they were trained for their entire childhood, basically their entire life, basically. But when after college or after academics,
Mhm.
they don't know what to do. They don't
Right.
know, yeah, what's next.
I think it was hard for me to find a job that was the right fit. Sometimes transportation is an issue. I'm not able to drive, so getting to a place could be hard. And a lot of people, some employers, they wanted you to have a driver's license, even if it didn't involve driving. And
Exactly.
sometimes I would find ways to get there, and I would go into an interview, and they just, yeah, if they found out you didn't, sometimes I'd mention that just to kind of get a feel of what they were going to be like. And some of them had some real discrimination with that.
Really?
I also, yeah,
Can
some
you
would
tell
be
us
like,
about that?
oh, sure. I was at a job interview, and I was telling the woman, okay, well, I'll be coming in on the bus. And she said, well, what are we supposed to do if the bus is late? And I'm thinking, well, you can have that experience if you are in a car, or other forms too. And uh, and some people say you shouldn't say that in interviews. I mean, and I know there's some, but this one was not exactly going well. And I can also remember she looked at my resume and said, "Oh, you like working with students that have disabilities?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh, well, we don't have any students that have disabilities here." So at that point, I'm like, "Yeah, this interview isn't going to lead to a job." So I was fine with that. And sometimes it would also be in the job description,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd had to ask those really difficult questions. Um, is this required? And sometimes they said it wasn't, but I didn't get the job. Or if it was going to be a job where I'd have to travel back and forth to different sites, even locally, I knew I couldn't do that. And so sometimes that was hard. And I mean, those places, I mean, I can understand. And I could definitely understand if it was a job where I had to pick up clients to take them to the program facility. I obviously couldn't do that. And that was really a hard thing. Now, I also had a job that I was at where you were encouraged to talk about your disability. It was with an agency that helped people with disabilities live in their own homes. And I thought, okay, great. I found the right place for me. But the job that I went for, which was information and referral, uh, they weren't offering it to me. They offered me a job in payroll. And it was not the right place for me at all. And I really struggled at the job. And we tried some accommodations, but they just weren't working. And the whole job just didn't not work out. And the real kicker was they thought that I was doing this so I could get unemployment, and I was making the mistakes. And certainly we got that all resolved, that's not what I was doing. And so that was really hard, and that was defeating because I was going in there and I was trying, and it wasn't working out. I was very lucky that I found the right employer. I work as a teacher's aide in the school, and I work with students that have disabilities, and some of them don't. And I'm pretty honest about having a disability. And luckily, my supervisor, the teachers I work with, they're all really understanding. Uh, the kids know not to ask for help with math, but I can help them with reading or English, or I can read a test to them, or just about anything else, but can't read. I mean, well, excuse me, I can read. I'm just not able to do the math. Sorry. But and they're understanding about that. And some employers have been, and other ones haven't. But uh, it's nice when you work for somebody that truly does understand.
That's also the problem, though. Like when people hear that we or people have learning disability, or we have learning disability, sometimes though they think that it's only for academics. Yeah,
Yeah,
like they don't realize that we still struggle in normal things like doing taxes, doing uh fill up documents, fill up paperworks
yeah,
for any medical procedure, or
right.
just getting the driver's license. It's difficult for
Yeah,
us.
it can be to understand what somebody's saying. Sometimes I have to read things out loud. Sometimes I have to have someone else read over and be like, okay, just having that extra set of eyes. Um, I think what was really helpful is when I had the intro to logics teacher, we would go over fallacies, and he said, I don't expect you to remember every single one of these things, but what I want you to do is when you read something and you don't understand it, or you hear something and you don't quite get it, think about this and read it over, or go back and replay that, and just open your eyes up to that. And I think that really helped me be able to do a lot of things that I can do now.
And what you do also is really, the key. Because when people
Mhm.
find their first interview, their first job interview,
Mhm.
they sometimes overthink, like this is
Right.
it for them, without realizing you're
Yeah.
gonna go bunch of job interviews to really, get that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and if one doesn't work out, there's always
It's
another
okay.
job out there. There's always another. Yeah, it's okay. It really is. You can find your place, and that's the thing that's really important.
And I really hope that people who are, struggling to find a job, um, please don't get discouraged, because it's really
Right.
it's normal, and trying new things should be normal,
Mhm.
because we have
Right.
this mindset from the past generations that, oh, you should have planned your life on this and that, without realizing, like, there's no really age, how do you call this, age timeline, if I'm saying it
Right.
correctly,
Right.
because
Yeah.
in the past generations, especially here growing up in the Philippines, you really have a timeline, and that's not really, a thing, because people through different things,
Hmm.
people through different situation, different issues, but the important thing is, where your passion at, where trying new things finds that passion.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Find new things. Find things that you want to be able to go and do. And there really isn't a timeline for things to happen. I know. Uh, I never was. I can remember wanting all those things and being frustrated when it didn't happen. Uh, but God had other plans in my life, and
Mm-hmm.
it turned out to be a lot better. And it came in His time, and it turned out to be the perfect one.
um how did you handle that, people giving you a timeline? i i
I
I
think,
understand it's very difficult.
yeah, it was. I mean, it was hard. I mean, it wasn't an exact one, like, oh, at this age, you should be doing this. But I think what really helped me was I had some friends that really invested in me. They were a couple years older and they were good people that had interests. And they kind of were like, well, here's some things we can do in the meantime. We had a lot of fun together. We experienced life, and I could go and they could just simply be my friend. And I think that was really important. But it was also that encouragement that these things are going to happen. These positive, happy things are going to happen in your life. It just may not be when you want them, and it may not also come in the package that you expected it.
Exactly. And let's go back a bit, um after college, because
Mhm.
people have this, or young people have the stigma that when you're off to college, or you're done with college, um they might think that, oh, this is a kumbaya moment where I'm gonna find a new job, I'm gonna find great job, I'm gonna find great employers, great
Mhm.
people. With you, does your expectation out of college meet, or it underwhelms you, or overwhelms you?
I think whenever you're young, it can be real. I can remember being really fearful that I couldn't handle things and that I wasn't going to find a job or I wasn't going to be able to do things because of the disability. So I had more of that fearful and not having that confidence. And I wish I could have went back and
Mm-hmm.
while I was waiting for all those things to happen, if I wish I could have changed a lot of the attitude and because it wouldn't have worried so much because those things were going to happen as long as I was putting the steps forward. So I think that was hard. And I think I didn't know who I was. That was, well, I knew who I was, but I think it was difficult because I was just so afraid that, oh, I'm not going to be able to do any of that stuff. So the confidence wasn't there. And it just took a while. A lot of things, it was just time, it was just experience. And everything that I went through did have a purpose, did have a plan. And it's really neat to go back and look at that and say, okay, this is why that happened. And there's some things that maybe I may not understand, but other things I can look back and say, yeah, this had a reason for what happened.
Exactly. And, like, in your early days, I know
Hmm.
we're getting back a bit, but um during those times, do you have any, like, regrets? like for me, um having struggle academically, I have this regret of not um taking an entrance exam in a uh
Mhm,
huge university here in the Philippines, because here in the Philippines, one of the top schools, or top schools here,
mhm,
is in the University of the Philippines, where it's really difficult to get in. Like, you have to take this
mhm,
public upcat, what they call, where a lot
mhm.
of smart children, or smart high school student um gonna take an exam, so that they're gonna uh get in the university. And the reason why I have regret, because I listened to my teachers. Because when I
Mhm.
announce to my teachers that, oh, I wanna take the upcat, their first thought, and I'm not kidding, their first thought is, why, you're not smart enough. Like, look at your grades. They're in, they're even good
Right.
enough for college. You know what I mean? I think that's
Right,
one of my
right,
regrets.
exactly. Right. I think maybe the regret that I have was I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself and I worried so much about what other people thought about me. And I think if I would have went back and I just would have had that confidence and I would have had would have not had that worry and that anxiety, I just would have enjoyed the journey a lot better.
I think uh same feeling here, because if I
Yeah.
have a confident if I have confident just to,
Mhm.
listen to what I want, other than people saying about me, I think, like, my academic life maybe can shift a lot, because I still went to grade school here in the Philippines,
Yeah.
but I didn't
Mhm.
finish it, because other than I'm struggling academically, but I want to do projects. I want to start a company. This
Right.
young mindset of mine during those days. So, you know, like, I want to be the next Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, drop who
Yeah.
drop out. But, you know, uh, life change. So after that, like, how was it um handling those children? Because I think you're gonna have different perspective on teaching those kids, because you have this disability, this
Yeah.
learning disability that they have. So you know the saying that I want to do things to others where others didn't do to me, that sort of thing.
Right, right. Do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I think that does have a perspective because I understand the frustration. I understand when I have a student that comes in, sometimes how scared they are about what the future holds, and
Mm-hmm.
they're nervous or they don't think that they're very smart. So I can kind of go in there and I can be. Sometimes I do tell them, okay, I have a learning disability, and so other times I might just say, well, I'm not very good at math, or I really struggle with that, and I get some interesting responses. I had one girl, she couldn't understand. Well, why aren't you good at math or something? I said, well, God just didn't give me that ability. And another girl goes, that's me too. And she was in seventh grade. And I thought that was just, I wish somebody would be validating that. Would have done that when I was younger. So I'm able to go in and do that. So that's really rewarding. And it's also rewarding to do some of the things that people did do, like read a test out loud to me, or just be able to give me that extra time. I get to do that with the students. So it's coming full circle. And there's even humorous responses. I remember I was working in a first grade classroom and I've, of course, struggled with the math even at that age, with that student at that level. And the students said, "Oh, why can't you do this?" And they thought you made a mistake. And I just said, "Yeah, I'm not that good at math." And the little girl said, "Well, there's grown up school for that." And I just laughed. I thought that was just humorous.
Um do you handle um different, like, I know there's a different way to handle this, but when you handle students who have learning disability but having, different kind of learning disability, because there's um difficulty in reading, basically dyslexic,
Mhm.
and now some people who are struggling, you know really having
Right.
ADHD. How can you, like, how do you handle that, those certain things?
I try to get Right. What I try to do is I try to gather as much information about the student as I can, and I try to customize what's going to work for that student. Every student's going to be different, even if they have the same disability. So I try to look for different ways of how they're going to learn best. And if I have a student that struggles with reading, well, I'm good with reading, so I'll read things out loud to them, and we'll work on that. Sometimes I'll write stuff down. I can't always read my handwriting, and they can't always read it, but they're able to type in what their response is, and it helps to keep me on track, or it helps to keep them on track. So I think it's knowing what the student needs to the best of my ability, and being able to go out there and just give them what they need on an individual level.
And before I let you go, um for, you know you teaching this uh this incredible children, how can you, like, motivate them? Because I know it's very different from school to outside world,
Hmm.
where when you're in your class, they have this support from you, but in terms of, I'm gonna go outside, go with their friends, hanging out with their families,
Hmm.
it's very different. Now, the question, I think, the perfect way to ask this, um how can we help students still motivate to go to school? Like, when they come to you, they're motivated, they're excited because they love you, because they relate you. But in terms of outside, they might be, discouraged from coming to school again, because life kicks
Right.
in, or some people
Mhm.
might say this and that, that might discourage them.
I think it's that having that encouragement is something that's really powerful. I can remember something that really encouraged me was whenever I was in school, I had a student teacher. In the midst of everybody telling me I couldn't do it, she told me, "You can go to college. There's students that have disabilities. You can do that." And I don't remember the student teacher's name, but sometimes when I was at college, that's the voice that I remembered, that I could do it. And
That's
I think
awesome.
just putting that encouragement out there for them and looking for their interests and seeing what motivates each student, I think that's important.
And that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Where they can
Oh,
find
thank
you?
you. They can find me at michellesmission.blog.
And that's awesome. So, with that being said, again, thank you so much for coming. I really have fun. I really enjoyed
Oh,
our conversation.
thank you. Same here. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much once again.
So, with that being said, peace out, people.
Bye.
They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that could make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. I got all this potential that's deep inside of me, but they hate when you're successful cause they try to be. They sit there being judgmental because you're trying things, and they just want you to settle and do the right thing. So get a good job, don't slack off. Wake up every morning, make a good impression on your boss. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do, and when you're making money, make sure you don't spend it too soon. Fuck that, I'll do what I wanna do. I got a different path from everyone, and that includes you. Who are you to tell me how to live life? In these times it feels like nobody's right, yeah. So I'ma figure out what else we succeed, and then invest all of my time into that and proceed. need whatever the hell could make me happy, and I don't think you have a clue what could that be. They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that can make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that can make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. I think this life could be special if I get rid of the devils. They think that I am a rebel, I think they want me to settle. There's nobody on my level. They think that work is too stressful, I think that work is essential. The grind is all in your mental, and I don't think you understand what I'll go through just to be in control of my life soon. All the negativity, man, I'm immune. I don't really need a mask with all I've been through. I've been making changes for the ages. 5-10 year plans are contagious. I attack that shit, I'm tenacious. And if you ain't, get the fuck out of my way then. Got one life, I won't regret it. I will fight until I get it. I'll look back one day from heaven and say, damn, I learned some lessons. And say, damn, I had no questions. I had fun in every second, and the journey was a blessing, yeah. They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that